All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Heated Sports Podcast. My name is Justin Imler, and as usual, I'll be your host here for the entire episode. We have a lot that we're going to get into, so I'll just break it all down here real quick. I'm going to go into all the details surrounding the Anthony Davis trade to the Los Angeles Lakers. Now that trade's in full effect, the Pelicans got a lot in return, and now that they have Zion officially, I'll get into all the details surrounding that. Going into baseball as well, there's a lot of news surrounding baseball. The Nationals and the White Sox are looking to extend their netting for foul balls going all the way to the foul poles. So I'll get into that and why I think that's a great idea and something that should have happened a long time ago. And another team in the MLB is actually looking to expand their franchise to another city, but they're not going to be playing in that new city for the entire season. So I'll get into that and a whole lot more here coming up. Also, we have a special guest lined up for the back half of the show. Harrison Grimm, an NBA writer for the Painted Lines, is going to be on the show with us, and we're going to go into a lot of details surrounding a lot of the overall things happening in the NBA and some free agency previews. So we're going to get him on the show here in the back half as well. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back, and then we'll get started. All right, guys, so now we're ready to get started. But first off, I have a quick, important announcement as far as the podcast and what the future is going to look like. Right now, this is going to be our last episode for the next couple weeks. So long story short, as most sports fans know, there's a huge lull that happens in the sports calendar year, and that's pretty much happening right now. So other than NBA free agency, which we've been talking about a lot, there really isn't a whole lot going on. And us here at Heated Sports, we have a lot of conversations that we want to have in terms of how we can kind of grow here as a brand and kind of keep this podcast rolling. So this break isn't going to be long. We're going to be back up and running 100% with the weekly podcast, getting ready for the preview of the NFL season. So we're going to be diving into a lot of NFL talk, a lot of fantasy football talk as well. So we're excited for what the future is going to look like. But yeah, just that announcement real quick that this is going to be the last episode here for the next few weeks, probably the next month and a half at the very longest. But we're definitely going to be back up and running. A lot of content is still going to be coming your way on the social media side. The articles are still going to be coming every single week. So we'll have announcements on all of our social media pages for that. A lot of different content coming to social media as well. So we're still going to be putting out a lot of great content, a lot of great takes for you guys. Just as far as this weekly podcast we have on Tuesday nights, we're just going to be taking a break from that here. So just wanted to get that off the bat. Now I'm going to dive into a lot of the talks that I previewed. So first things first, we're going to talk about Anthony Davis going to the Lakers. Just groundbreaking trade. It was bound to happen eventually. Lakers making another big move. In total, I think the Lakers really overpaid. And it's something that, yes, they overpaid, but they had to do it if they wanted to just compete in the current stage of the NBA. They needed to add some guys around LeBron, and clearly this young staff that they had really wasn't doing it for them. The confidence kind of was really shot after last year's trade deadline during the season, hearing they were all looking to be traded anyway or most likely going to be traded. So it's tough to see, but they all have Josh Hart, Lonzo Ball, and Brandon Ingram all have a new home now with the Pelicans, kind of rejuvenating that franchise with Zion. So that's great. The Pelicans got a lot of draft picks as well, all for Anthony Davis. But Anthony Davis is going to re-sign long-term with the Lakers. But now that we're looking at it, the financial side for the Lakers and just the overall future and growth of this franchise is really going to be put on hold, and it's all relying on a championship in the next couple years. My window for that, I'm giving them 3 years. I have 3 years left for prime LeBron James, and that's really the only shot they have of winning a title is if LeBron is playing at this level that he has been in recent years and his entire career. But looking at it, I mean, Anthony Davis is, in my opinion, a top 5 player. So you have 2 top 5 players in the league. You have Kyle Kuzma, who I think is a great number 3, and I really don't think that they need to add another max contract. I mean, that's really been a lot of the talks. Can they move the money around where they can just barely afford another max guy in, for example, a Kemba Walker or a Jimmy Butler? And yes, that would be great. The media would eat that up. That'd be a really, really talented top 4 if you're looking at the Lakers' overall roster. But that would be it. It would most likely just be 5-on-4 pretty much the entire league in the entire season, because the Lakers just simply won't be able to afford any other assets. That's really where all their money's going. They're still trying to move around their current contracts of players that no one's even heard of, just to try to move this money around to try to make it work. But I'm using that money they have left, and I think they need to just add some focal pieces around this core three. I think this is a great core three, and I mean, people need to kind of respect Kyle Kuzma for what he is. He's a great scorer, he's a great asset to this team, and he can really help out a lot. So I mean, I think he needs to be in that conversation with LeBron and Anthony Davis as like a nice core three for the Lakers. And they just need some shooters that they can kind of add around. They really need a point guard. I mentioned Kemba Walker, but I just don't think they should put all that money into that basket in Kemba Walker. They can get a nice cheaper point guard and just add some other shooters around that team, because that's really what they're going to need, and that's really how they're going to be able to stay competitive in the West. Moving on a little bit to baseball, I mentioned that there is a franchise that is looking to expand, and reports came out this past week that the Tampa Bay Rays were looking into the possibility of expanding their franchise to Montreal. But the thing of the matter is that they wouldn't be moving to Montreal. They would actually just be playing half of their season there while still trying to stay in Tampa Bay. And I mean, this was kind of breaking news. It's at least for baseball fans. This is something that's not even close to being heard of. Really just raising a lot of questions on what the Rays are actually thinking. And if you just want my honest input, I'm just going to break it down real quick. This isn't happening. What are we talking about? Yes, Montreal would be a good city for baseball, expanding it to Canada again, but let's just be honest. No team is going to play half their season in one city and half their season in the other city. Which, how much do these cities invest on having these franchises here? The biggest thing that Tampa Bay wants is a new stadium. That's been kind of the rumors around the league for a while. The Rays want a new stadium in Tampa Bay, and I think this is kind of just them trying to push their leverage a little bit, saying, hey, yeah, we're looking into moving. If they would negotiate with Montreal, Montreal would be open to doing this for us. We need something here in Tampa Bay. I don't think that's going to happen either. Tampa Bay is just not a good market. They're really not the best market in any terms. They really shouldn't even have a baseball team in the city, to be completely honest. The market just isn't there in Florida right now regardless. Look at the Miami Marlins as another team that's down there. The Rays just need to kind of take it for what they have right now. They're a decent franchise. They put up great numbers in the beginning of the year. They're still staying competitive. Really, that's how you need to get those, the fans in the seats. You don't need a huge billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar stadium built. Just stay in Tampa Bay. You're not moving to Montreal. You're not going to get a new stadium either. So just relax on all that. That was a ridiculous thing. People are making it out like there's a chance of it happening, but I just really don't think so. Something else I want to talk about, I kind of break it down here as well real quick. Reports came out that the Washington Nationals over the All-Star break are looking to expand their foul ball netting all the way to the foul poles. The White Sox are also in reports of doing this here in the offseason. This might not be the most the greatest topic to talk about, but it's something that really needed to be done. And as for myself, as being a pretty big baseball fan, I'm glad that it's happening, and it really should have been happening a long time ago. But if you aren't aware, these events are most likely happening because of what happened a few weeks ago. Cubs outfielder Albert Almora Jr. lined a foul ball right past the current foul ball netting that they had, and it actually struck a little girl in the stands. Almora was just instantly heartbroken, just overall emotional, just being comforted by everybody on the team that it's not his fault. But overall, this was just really heartbreaking to see. Almora ended up leaving the game just because he couldn't take with what actually happened. Thankfully, the girl ended up being okay, so all was well there in the end. But just a really depressing and overall just frightening scene that happened during that baseball game between the Cubs and the Astros a few weeks ago. And if I'm being honest, again, this is something that should have happened a while ago. And yes, you could just make the argument of assumption of risk. If you're sitting in those stands and you chose those seats, yes, there's always the risk of hitting the foul ball, and the fans know that. But you can't control what happened to that little girl. She obviously wasn't getting out of the way. The ball was completely drilled. And that's just something that expanding out that netting isn't going to ruin the experience for any of those fans being blocked by it. It's something that needs to happen in every single stadium going forward. Most likely in this offseason is when I think this needs to happen. It's tough to do it in the middle of the season when there's so many games being played, but this is something that needs to happen now, and it needs to happen before anything like this happens again. So I was really happy to see the Nationals and the White Sox taking this next step, and it's something that, again, every single team needs to consider going forward. So that's my takes on a couple topics here. We're going to keep it short. So now we're going to transition here real quick. We're going to get Painted Lines NBA writer Harrison Grimm, another Millersville resident here. So we're going to get him onto the podcast, going over a lot of great topics. We're going to get his opinions on the Anthony Davis trade as well, and just getting his take on what the Sixers did in the draft, and just also getting into some free agency previews as well. So we're going to get him on. We'll transition, and we'll be right back, guys. So stay tuned. All right, everybody, we are back. We're all transitioned here. So we have special guest Harrison Grimm, writer for the Painted Lines here. Thanks for coming on the show here, man. We really appreciate it. Also a Millersville student, so reached out to us a while back since we're all based out of here in Millersville. So we're happy to have you on, man. Thanks for coming in.
Man, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, not a problem. So like I mentioned, you pretty much specify a lot of NBA coverage, specifically a lot for the Sixers as well, for the Painted Lines. So we really want to get a lot of your takes on a lot of the drama and a lot of the action happening in the NBA. The season's wrapped up in terms of like the postseason and the finals wrapping up, but I mean the NBA is still as crazy as ever right now. Draft just wrapped up, free agency starts in less than a week, so there's really a lot going on. First thing I want to get your head around, or wrap your head around, is just the James Harden Chris Paul feud that pretty much broke out here a week or so ago. Just pretty much claiming that they haven't spoke to each other. Chris Paul rumors about demanding a trade. Just what was your reaction to that? And do you think a trade is actually possible with his ridiculous contract?
You know, that's such a messy situation. You know, you have Woj and Shams reports talking about how Houston's currently shopping him around. Daryl Morey, the Houston GM, has repeatedly said Chris Paul is going to be a Houston Rocket. And, you know, those are two credible sources who are really right most of the time. And it's just really a messy situation. I think there is some issues between Chris Paul and James Harden. Maybe they're a bit overblown right now. But with Chris Paul's contract, there's just no team that really wants him. And if they did want to trade him, you're going to have to sweeten the deal per se with picks, maybe including another player. I just don't see him getting moved anytime soon.
No, I mean, I definitely think he's going to be a Houston Rocket for the remainder of his contract. It's around $40 million a year for the next 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
For an aging, I mean, I'm not even going to say he's a superstar anymore. He's still a great player, but up there in age with that type of contract, no one's really going to want to take that on for a guy like Chris Paul is currently. I mean, it's more of, I think it's like a new school versus old school type of mentality. I mean, Chris Paul, like I said, he's more of a veteran in this league now. James Harden, obviously he's been in the league for a while, but he's an up and coming superstar these last couple years in the MVP conversation here for this year. But I think James Harden knows how good he is. He's a superstar in this league. He's going to be in the MVP conversation for the next few years with his style of play. And he's really, not that he's disrespecting Chris Paul, but James Harden has the mentality that it's his team, and Chris Paul is kind of just another asset to James Harden's team. And I mean, I think Chris Paul, in a sense, he's trying to help James Harden. He wants to win and he wants to succeed with his organization, but I don't know if it's more on James Harden's side, if it's more of just his attitude, or if it's more kind of Chris Paul just trying to make the team about him. I really who do you think is the main problem, I guess, for this situation?
And by the sounds of it, it sounds like Chris Paul, and whether this is overblown, true or false, whatever the real story is, it's a really bad look for him, because this is the second or third time in his career where he's been labeled a problem with the team. We saw it back with Blake Griffin and the Clippers. You know, obviously Houston should center around James Harden over Chris Paul, obviously.
Yeah, definitely.
And I'll tell you what, Chris Paul he doesn't look good in this situation. You know, when he got traded there, I thought it was an excellent trade, to get him. I think he was exactly what they needed, but he did not take a pay cut. If anything,
not at all.
Houston overpaid to retain him. And, if he really wanted to win a ring, that's the thing with Chris Paul. Amazing player, never won a ring. He should have taken a pay cut. Even if he earned $20 million a season, that would really help out Houston's situation, and you could surround them with better role players.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to mention that next. Just with the drama that surrounded around the time of his exit with the Clippers, him and Blake Griffin, very similar situation, very great duo at the time with the Clippers, and just more issues spiraling surrounding more focused on Chris Paul, which led to his exit then in LA. Clearly, the contract situation again is a lot more of an issue here now that he's in Houston versus when he was wrapped up with the Clippers, but I don't want to say it's unsalvageable, but if you're gonna ask me if this current Rockets team is gonna be in the championship conversation, I don't think so. I mean, you think that these guys are grown men, they're adults, they can take their issues, but when they get on the court, then it's just basketball. But I don't really know. I mean, there's a lot of off the field issues right now. Again, this could be very blown out of proportion. The regular season is a long way away now for 2019-2020, but I mean, it's gonna be interesting to see. The West is a lot more competitive now, even with Golden State most likely I'll just say taking a year off next year in terms of competing for a championship. But this Houston team, I mean, I think they'll still be able to make a playoff push and everything. But if you're asking, just even with James Harden's style of play, we've seen that it's not the most successful come playoff time. And, I mean, that can be tough to say since they've matched up against the Warriors both times the last couple years. So, I mean, that's a tough team in any regard to try to beat in the playoffs. But it's not a good look overall, I think, for both of them. Like you said, for Chris Paul, especially with the trade demands. Again, if they're 100% legit, we don't really know right now. But either way, I think we're both in agreement that he's going to stay in Houston for the remainder of that contract.
Yeah, it's such a tricky situation. You know, they have so much money tied up in Chris Paul, James Harden, and Clint Capella. You know, those are all great players. But you don't have the talent right now surrounding them to go out and win a championship. So it's going to be very interesting to see what Houston does to get out of this hole that they dug themselves into.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I definitely agree with you there. So I'm going to transition a little bit. We're going to get into some more like free agency discussion now. First guy I want to bring up is Kawhi Leonard. Clearly him and Kevin Durant, the two huge names here in free agency. Rumors. We don't know how much we're going to dive into that, but apparently he was spotted buying his own moving boxes in Toronto. And of course, just something as little as this, just completely blowing up the sports world. Holy crap, where's he going? Why is he doing this? He's definitely leaving Toronto. He's going to LA. He must be going to LA, blah, blah, blah. Reports coming out. He's planning visits with both LA teams, the Clippers and the Lakers. Obviously, Toronto is still in heavy consideration as well, but he's also planning visits with the Nets and the Philadelphia 76ers, which clearly a lot of local fans around here love to see the Sixers thrown in the mix. You cover the Sixers a good bit. I mean, I know you probably can't give me a lot of information, but what do you think, like, the chances of that actually happening? I mean, you have to assume that means that Jimmy would not be able to stay. The Sixers really can't afford two max or close to max deals in terms of getting a guy like Kawhi Leonard. But what do you think? I mean, that kind of surprised a lot of people that the Sixers were in the mix there.
You know, with all my writing experience and just NBA knowledge, I would give them maybe a 0.1% chance.
All right, I said in like our heated sports group, I said 1%, so you're not even giving the full 1%. But
I don't even think he realistically will take a meeting. I think he's either going to be a Toronto Raptor next season or he's going to be an LA Clipper.
Yeah.
Right now, I would put the Clippers above the Raptors just because, you know, he's a guy who's already won now 2 rings. Winning isn't necessarily the most important thing to him. If he wants to go home, he's going to go home.
I was going to say, he's from like family and everything in the San Diego area. So that's like maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours to like right out of San Diego, a lot closer to home. Like you said, winning championships now with 2 different teams, 2 different franchises. I agree with you. I would definitely put the Clippers a little bit ahead of the Raptors. I mean, that's like the pretty clear one, like the 2 options that are left. Like, yeah, those other teams are in the mix, but I don't think anybody's giving them a real legitimate shot. It's interesting. I think if he does, I was going to say shock the world, but I don't think it'd be that much of a shock. If he would stay in Toronto, it's going to be on a short deal. I'd say maybe like a 2 or a 3-year deal. I don't think he's going to just go a full-out max 5-year, 6-year deal to stay in Toronto, because I think at some point in his career he will go home to one of the LA teams, whether that's now or whether that would be in a few years from now. But so, I mean, you're sold on the Clippers. Do you think the Clippers would have a shot to land anyone else? I mean, they have a good supporting cast around him if it's just Kawhi that goes in there. I think that'd be a really competitive team. But could you see anyone else maybe joining him in LA if he would choose to do that?
Well, right now there's a bunch of reports coming out that Al Horford's seriously considering the Clippers, and that's a team that really needs a bona fide center. Yes, they have Montrezl Harrell. Ivica Zubac is a restricted free agent. But apart from that, they don't really have a defined center. So I think Al Horford would be a great fit for them, and maybe that would lure Kawhi even more because that's another win-now piece.
Yeah, definitely. I'll say, I mean, I think if you just throw Kawhi in that mix, I think the Clippers are one of the top teams in the West to compete for a championship. Yeah, if you throw a guy in like Al Horford into that mix, I mean, that just takes it up to a whole nother level. I want to transition here a little bit. So I touched on like my beginning segment, all my thoughts on the Anthony Davis trade and what I kind of thought about that. Just looking at like the future of the Lakers here now. Obviously, the entire NBA world would love to see another superstar go join Anthony Davis and LeBron in LA. But I mean, do you think that's like a legitimate, like, is there an actual chance of like a Kemba or a Jimmy joining in? Or are they so just in trouble financially that the smarter route would just go to grabbing some more like smaller assets to build around their core 2? Or I'll even say core 3, throwing Kuzma in there as well.
Well, it's really remarkable how irresponsible LA and Rob Pelinka have been with their cap situation and not waiting to execute the Anthony Davis trade, because that's actually going to hamper their abilities towards making room for another max contract. In terms of free agents going there, if I'm the Lakers, I wouldn't go after a free agent, and maybe that's a bit of a hot take, but here's the thing. I think Kemba is staying in Charlotte, whether that's on a super max or max.
Yeah,
I think that's a given.
I'll say that surprised me because I saw some reports too saying he'd maybe even be willing to take less money to kind of help build around Charlotte as well. And I thought, not that like Charlotte isn't like a great city to play for, like Kemba's obviously made a home there, but that team really hasn't been in the conversation to compete in the NBA in recent years. And I think it'd be interesting. I mean, if he takes a supermax, that kind of puts a damper on things and getting other assets to go along with him. But if he would end up taking a pay cut, like a couple of those reports were saying, that could open up the door to keep Kemba there long term, but also adding some pieces around him. But
yeah, and not with getting off topic too much, but I mean, Kemba is such a great player in person from what I've heard. And here's the thing: whether Kemba's getting paid the supermax, max, or a vet minimum, the Hornets are going to have the same amount of salary to dish out to players. So, you know, he's someone who's been underpaid his entire career. He should just cash out and earn a supermax and show his loyalty.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that. I mean, that's definitely a good look for the fan base as well, keeping your superstar and seeing that he's like devoted to that franchise too. But getting back to the Lakers, so your hot take was that they shouldn't really go after any free agents.
Correct, yeah.
And I'll say, I'm sorry not like to interrupt, but like my big thing was that I definitely don't think they should go after these superstars. I mean, yeah, Kemba and like Jimmy are like kind of the main two that have been in the mix in terms of like big name free agents that they can try to move around as much money as possible. But I think if they do that, then like I think you and I could just go and walk onto the franchise and get some playing time next season, because like there's literally no one else on that team, let alone like people they'll be able to afford to come in the future. Like that's just literally just all of their money going towards that last max contract. But just to kind of switch gears, like I think they should go after at least a couple like smaller free agents, doing a few like minor deals. Like I don't want to say they should do the same thing as last offseason where they got guys like Rondo on just like a 1-year deal and like Lance Stevenson on a 1-year deal. Like get these guys in for like the next couple years while LeBron's still in his prime, but I definitely don't think they should break the bank and try to get another guy. Like there is such thing as like having too many personalities, too many ball hogs on the same team. That's like in a sense, because you just have like you have a core three. You have a great core three. I think Kuzma is a great asset, and he's probably one of the best like number threes in the entire league now. I think Kuzma's a really great talent. So I mean, you have your main three guys. Build around those three guys with some other pieces that are more affordable, I guess.
I definitely think right now that they should go after smaller names, still solid players. But right now they definitely need shooting. Obviously LeBron is best when he's driving to the rim. Anthony Davis needs room to work in the post. Yes, he can shoot, but obviously he's best down low. So I think they should go after someone like a Nikola Mirotic who you can pick up for like maybe $10 million a season, and you know, fill out your roster with solid veterans instead.
Definitely. And I'll say that like we mentioned Kemba already. I think a point guard is definitely their biggest need right now. Someone to just bring the ball up the floor, dish it out to Davis or LeBron, just on command most likely. But yeah, definitely getting some solid shooters around those guys I think would be huge for them, and that's really what they're going to need to compete, because like we've already mentioned, the West isn't going anywhere. People are kind of not like, yeah, the Warriors are injured, it's anybody's game, but it's still going to be competitive for sure, and people are hyping up the Lakers, and they're going to most likely the entire offseason, but I don't think it's like a shoe-in. I think they need to add at least a little bit more to want to be competitive for the next few years. So I'm going to transition here again. NBA draft wrapping up here last week. I want to talk a little bit specifically Sixers first, because the Sixers made some moves. They traded around a little bit before making their first pick in Matisse Thybulle, and as a guy that covers the Sixers, is in the locker room a lot. Again, tell us what you can, I guess, but what do you think about Thybulle? Do you think he'll be a good fit out of Washington for the Sixers going forward? A great defender, big guy in steals, averaged between like 2 to 3 steals a game. Really great defender. Do you think that's what the Sixers needed, or do you think they should have went another route?
Yeah, I mean, they have a bunch of needs right now that they got to fill out, but you know, they definitely got at least 1 or 2 of those needs in Matisse Thybulle. Thybulle is, well, he actually was a historic defender in terms of college play. He broke Gary Payton's record for steals. He's a phenomenal defensive player. There is some concern that those defensive numbers in terms of steals and blocks are a little bit inflated, because Washington was very heavy on the 3-2 zone. But I think Thibault has the chance to be a really good off-ball defender, just causing havoc in terms of passes and such. His shot is a bit streaky, and there is some concern surrounding that. He managed to shoot 40% from 3 in a sophomore year. It dipped down to about 30% his senior year. His mechanics look solid, I think. It's just going to be in terms of consistency. And I like this pick for the Sixers. I think it was one of the guys that they wanted to get. They necessarily didn't want someone with a ton of potential that can develop into a star per se, because you already got a ton of people demanding the ball, especially if you bring back Tobias Harris and Jimmy Butler. You also throw Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid into that mix. You want someone that can play off the ball and just fit into a role, and that's what Matisse Thybulle is. He's someone who has a very high floor, but he also doesn't have a very high ceiling as well. And I think he's going to be a solid player for them. I wasn't a big fan in terms of how they actually got him. They traded 20.
I'll say they moved around a good bit to try to just get the pick where they wanted, yeah.
They traded 24 and 33 to move up to 20, which I think is a bit of an overpay. I would like to see him move 34 instead, which is what they owned. So they could have picked ahead of the Celtics and probably got a guy who they were targeting in Carson Edwards. In terms of the other moves that they made, there was a lot of discussion. Obviously, selling draft picks is very stupid. I'm very against that.
I saw that tweet. Yeah, I think I liked it as well. I agreed with you there. I mean, if you're not in like that lottery conversation, like these like late picks, especially like the second round picks, like not that they're pointless, but like why just take some of like the best guys available? There's still a lot of talent there, but moving around as much as all the teams in the league really did, couldn't get that out. But yeah, I mean, there was just a lot of moves late, and I really didn't see the point either. So I agreed with you there.
Yeah, there's a lot of misunderstanding that the Sixers selling draft picks got money that went towards their cap space, and that's not the case when you sell draft picks. That's just money that goes into the owner's pocket per se. And what makes a GM a good GM, and I'm not calling Elton a bad GM. I think he's a fine GM. What makes a good GM great is when you work in margins and make marginal moves, like getting a role player in the second round. And there's still people on the board, as Bol, who's arguably one of the best prospects in the draft, was there at that point. And I would have liked to see him take Bol at some point, or maybe another player, just because of how thin they were this year, especially come playoff time.
Yeah,
they're running like an 8-man rotation. I like Thybulle. I hated all the other moves they made.
I mean, it raises a lot of questions, and I mean, I'm not like a huge like analyst in terms of like being able to decipher a lot of like those late round moves and everything. But I mean, when I saw them, like I kind of like questioned a lot of it too, and just, I mean, like, again, they know a lot more than I do, so I really can't like question it or like just discuss it too much. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I agree with you. I think Thybulle's going to be a great fit. But yeah, as far as like a lot of the other moves, they just seemed unnecessary, I guess is the word that I'll kind of use. But we'll kind of just have to wait and see if it pans out. One last quick tidbit I'll ask you here, because I don't think it's not a complete sports segment unless you talk about Zion Williamson a little bit. So yeah, just totally shocking. Zion goes first overall. Pelicans are just, I think, doing a great job in getting pieces right away, getting draft picks to build around Zion. And Jrue Holiday I'll throw in there too. Just what do you think about the Pelicans going into next season? Do you think that they have a shot like for a playoff push, or do you think Zion will take a little bit to kind of get adjusted into the league?
I think David Griffin is doing a phenomenal job with the Pelicans right now, and it hurts to see, as someone who roots for the Sixers, who they interviewed and obviously said wasn't a great fit, do so well. I think in terms of the Anthony Davis trade and building a roster around Zion, he's got a lot of pieces, especially he did a great job in draft picks. In case that Pelicans team does become competitive sooner rather than later, you have pick swaps, you have other picks that you can use to build around the roster while you still win. Zion's going to be, I think he's going to be a good player. I do think he's a little bit overhyped. That's not to say he's a bad player. I think he's going to be really good. I think he will win Rookie of the Year, especially in this draft with being how thin it was. And in terms of the Pelicans' win success early on, keep in mind they're playing in a tough Western Conference. I think if they were in the East, it might be a different story. They might be able to sneak into the playoffs, but they're not. So I think you're going to see him win, give or take 30, 35 games. Maybe see him as a 10 seed. I think they will make progress. I think Brandon Ingram, hopefully, as his blood clots are better. I think you'll see growth on that front. They've done a really good job just building the team. I think at this point now you just have to surround, again, that team with shooters, because you have Zion. Brandon Ingram isn't a high-volume three-point shooter. Lonzo Streaky with this three-point shot. Drew Holiday isn't that good of a shooter. So they definitely got to get shooting on that roster, and that's when I think they'll take the next step.
Yeah, for sure, man. I like that take a lot. They definitely have a lot of young talent that they brought in through the Lakers trade and everything, but yeah, they could really use some shooters, kind of like what we were mentioning with the Sixers and with the Lakers as well. Pretty decent commonality there, but yeah, they definitely can take some steps forward, I think. I'm not going to overhype them, just like you said. It's something that it's going to take a little bit. I mean, there's a lot of young talent. It's going to take them a lot to get adjusted and get acquainted with one another, since there's a lot of new pieces that are in that locker room now. But I'm excited to see it. I'm sure the overall sports world is going to eat the Pelicans up now with Zion there. But a lot of great takes, man. Again, Harrison Grimm, writer for the Painted Lines. We're really happy that you came on the show, man. We really appreciate it. Any final comments here before we wrap up?
Thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, of course, man. Not a problem. So, yeah, thanks, guys. We're going to wrap up the show there. So, thanks again. Be sure to check out the social media accounts. Check out the website, www.heated-sports.com, social media @heatedsports_. Make sure you check out the articles and all the other content we're putting out. And that's where we'll wrap it up. So, have a good rest of your week, guys, and we'll see you next time. See ya.